Hi, welcome everybody. My name is Ramon Gill. This is the Comic Arts Workshop. We've been doing this since around 2017, and we try to have at least an event once a month. Sometimes there's speakers, usually there's speakers. Every once in a while, it'll be a get together. But this next for the next 2 months, we actually have two speakers a month because so many people were saying yes, and I didn't want to like have them wait until November. So we're having two speakers a month, and and Enrica is our first one this month. Actually, we got lucky, sort of. Enrica has a little bit of a cold, so her voice is not too as lovely as it usually is. So she's asked her brother Peter, who is also in the horror business, to join us to share the load on the speaking. So we will be interviewing a comic book publisher and the filmmaker, both in the horror genre. So if we could please welcome them. Well, there's only a couple of us, but a little clap of hands, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves and what their career path is. So that's the first question, guys.
Well, my name is Enrica Jang. I am uh, editor-in-chief, Red Stylo Media. We started our company in 2008, been doing comics for a really, really long time. Comic anthologies, independent series, all indie comics. And my master plan, though, was to get sick right before this podcast to make my voice all weird because the next kind of project that I'm working on, we're making the business a family business. And as Ramon said, I'm in comics, my brother's in movies, and all comics people want to make their comics movies, and movie people keep talking about making making their movies into comics. So my brother and I figured that's what we were going to do. So Peter, I'll let you introduce yourself, but that's the next step for my company. So I'm really excited to talk about that project and the things we've been working on.
Hello, my name is Peter Jang. I am a stuntman and an actor here in Hollywood. I live in North Hollywood, California. I'm also a writer and director as well. I've done 4 short films, and one of the short films I did, and my sister and I are going to adapt into a comic and then turn into a feature film eventually. As far as horror goes, I kind of started my career with a nice big horror project. I was one of the brothers on the TV show The Originals, of the finale of the first season and the first episode of the second season of the TV show Original. So I was a werewolf, and I bit the Originals vampires, and so I got to play with that whole thing. Later on, I was a zombie in American Horror Stories, the last season. Not story, but stories plural, like the one that's the anthology series. So I was one of the zombies that drags them down to hell, and you'll see me in there as well when in the beginning when they flood the lake, and then we die that way. It's pretty fun. And then I also was just in a horror movie called Soulmates recently. It has a short theatrical run. It's on Amazon right now. You can watch it. I was the hanging man, and I got to be fed into a meat grinder, so that was fun. My sister still hasn't watched that one because she doesn't like to see me die, and that was a pretty gruesome one. So, um, but yeah, I mean, like my sister said, she does her comics. I work in film, and I'm looking to do more productions. My production company is Simplicity Pictures. It's right here, and the goal is, to turn her comics into screenplays, turn my screenplays into comics, and then we have a nice big library of stuff that we will be able to turn into films and TV shows. So we're building our family empire inside of media.
Before I go to the next question, I want to ask Peter a follow-up question.
Mhm.
It seems like the last couple of gigs you had have been in the horror genre. Are those things you choose, or it just so happens that you get cast in those things?
Well, those are the last ones I talked about. I actually work on a lot of different things. Like I said, I'm a stuntman. So I'm working on 911 this week. I worked on SEAL Team this year. I worked on SWAT for years, and CSI Vegas. I just had a TV. Oh,
Oh, okay.
actually, There was actually somewhat in the horror genre. I just had the opening scene on CSI Vegas. We find the dead body, so it's horror-ish. Then the episode's about cannibalism, so it's a pretty cool thing. You know, it's horror. If you're looking up CSI Vegas on the fourth episode, I can't remember the name of the episode, but I'm right at the beginning of the episode.
Look it up. Look it up.
Mhm.
So for both of you, what is the appeal of horror?
I think that I find it just cathartic. I think that when you're dealing with really primal emotions, love, fear, um, and just high pressure situations, that kind of like that just gets your blood going, and escapism. So, um, or I was always a reader, so it wasn't really difficult for me to get involved in story, but I think a lot of just escapism as a kid and the stuff that keeps you awake when you're just sitting in English class. So like the original horror stuff like Edgar Allan Poe, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, that kind of stuff was always super exciting for me. And then you want to write what you love. You want to write the stories that moved you and are exciting to you. So I think that for me is the core.
Well, I like horror a lot because I feel like it really takes stories to, it makes the characters in the stories go to the extremes. And really, we learn so much about humanity when people, deal with extreme situations, and you can't go any more extreme than, somebody, like some kind of, like some of the horror things in there because, people are scared out of their minds or, there's some kind of, supernatural thing that might not even happen in real life or even possible in real life, but it can really teach us a lot about the human condition and just how dear life is, and also how our relationships are most important when it comes to these extreme situations, no matter what they come up. And like my sister said, it's also very cathartic. You get to go in there, you see these like crazy things, and then afterwards you're just like, oh, that was great. And then then you get to go back to your life, and everything doesn't seem so dark anymore.
Was there a particular movie or book that triggered your interests in this genre?
Oh, I think I mentioned some of the first stuff. I think what's funny is I was one of those kids whose parents probably showed them horror movies a little too soon, just like a little too soon, and destroyed any sleep I had as a kid. So, the stories you can read horror stories and be scared and everything, but it's not the jump scare in your house. But if you're like really little and then you see a scary movie and those nightmares sort of keep you keep you running into your parents' bedroom and hiding under their covers. That's what I remember being the most formative for me. So when I had an opportunity at a show to meet Robert Englund, I just looked him in the eye and said, "You destroyed my childhood," and he just looked at me. You're welcome. You're welcome for that. So, but yeah, I think it was just great story. It just gets you started no matter what. But the media that stays with you, and like the whole world is going through this whole nostalgia thing, and like the properties from my childhood are all back. So it's a huge nostalgia time for my generation. But a lot of that stuff just comes from being moved by images and stories when you're super young and wanting to just create those things that you love so much.
What about you, Peter?
Well, oddly enough, I think, well, one of the first movies I remember that was a horror movie, and it was awful. I saw it later on in my life, and I was just like, I don't know why I was scared of this, but it's called Dr. Giggles, and it was just about a doctor on a rampage. I think it was just because I was pretty small, probably too little to watch
Too
it,
little.
but yeah. But reading the Edgar Allan Poe stories, actually, my sister, she, uh, she is very in depth, or very in tune with like his stories. But for me, I read them in school, and like the Pendulum one, I can't remember the name of it, and Cask of Amontillado, and these kind of stories are just like, they really were very visceral, and they really brought you in there. And I think it because I think because Poe was the godfather of horror, really. seeing the inception of it on the page, and then it really made me fall in love with just storytelling in general, because really it just the magic of being able to transport the reader or the viewer into the character's life and the situations that they're in. Like it gave me the first taste of it. And it really stuck with me. And I thought, one thing, and again, I was disappointed by the movie, but all of the marketing materials of Blair Witch Project were just, when I was younger, it was just like, wow, this is so crazy. And then like, the website was so cool, and like you're not sure if it was real or not. And then the way that they made it and stuff. But once I watched the movie, it kind of took the magic away. But that really also gave me a taste of how they can really, take people's imaginations, and they run with it. And it made me fall in love with just storytelling.
So it wasn't Enrica trying to scare you by forcing you to watch stuff, right?
I had to do it. You had to do it.
Actually,
I was his babysitter, so some of that might have been my fault.
You know what? Actually, this is actually a game that I actually read something recently about it. Totally forgot about it until recently. It was called Phantasmagoria, and it was such a messed up game. I don't know how it came out, but it was it was a couple of discs on a computer, and it was one of the first times where you had like very real looking people, and you just see these awful torture like things. And I was very young, and it was me and my other sister who are definitely too young, and then our babysitter at the same time, and like we were watching this stuff, we're like, and I think that was my sister's fault.
There you go. So
but
we're having things are getting revealed now.
But it was, again, it was just one of those things. It really just kind of, you couldn't help but look. And then it really kind of gave me it made me fall in love with storytelling in general. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Okay. Let me ask, Enrica, can you give us a sense of what it's like being a publisher? And the same question for Peter, except what it's like being a filmmaker, and in terms of like your day-to-day, or what are the things you need to do to make things happen, to put on projects.
Oh, well.
So yeah.
I think as a small publisher, as an indie publisher, it's just a small team effort, no matter what you're doing, unless you're coming to independent publishing with a whole ton of money. But generally, the projects we put together, when it comes to indie comics, you're really working with a team of about, maybe 3 or 4 people. So hopefully you like each other. Hopefully all those people like each other. And a lot of my projects have come together just because meeting folks in the industry, everybody wants to work and everybody wants to put together a project. And so you kind of piecemeal these things. So it's not an office environment per se, but a project that you're putting together after the day job and that kind of thing. But you keeping in contact. Coming up through comics, there's a lot before these sort of team building kinds of things. Like before the pandemic, there wasn't a lot. It was all phone calls. It was not, conferencing and video calls and stuff like that. So a lot of emails and a lot of really struggling with work-life balance, because when you're doing something that you love and you're trying to make it a project, there's no boundary sometimes between your home life and what becomes your work life. So but small team projects and that kind of thing. Red Stylo Media for several years, though, was putting together an annual anthology. And in order to make that work, it had to be a very regimented kind of schedule, because we knew we would announce a theme at the beginning of the year, and then spend the next 8 months putting the book together so that we would have the trade ready for New York Comic Con in October. And so it kind of turned the year into January, announce the open call. By March, you've got your teams put together. You spend the next couple of months checking in with each of the teams, making sure that those things are going. And there's always somebody to yell at because people are stalled over this way. You go over here to the other folks that are working, and it just kind of lots of heads, lots of arms, that kind of thing, constantly. So the difference between those larger group projects and then kind of coming to fruition, and then you've got like maybe 2 or 3 months of like, yeah, promotion for the book, and you're resting, and then getting ready for the next theme, getting ready for the next project. So the years
Yes.
turned by pretty fast, and suddenly, boom, 13 years have passed, and
Does Red Stylo do any like creator owned, or is it mostly anthologies?
I'm sorry, what was your question?
Does Red Stylo do any creator owned books, or is this mostly anthologies?
Both. We did an anthology every year for about 11 years.
How does a person get into an anthology, or somebody who wants to has a creator owned work that they want a Red Stylo to consider?
A lot of things, a lot of that was before the pandemic. I think our business model changed. My business model changed really around the pandemic, just the world changed at that time. And Kickstarter kind of changes things too, especially for anthologies. Um, Before that, in the before time, though, we would put out an open call in January 1 of every year. That was our New Year's morning, and put out the open call, announce a theme for the year. For several years, it was literary horror. So we did do an Edgar Allan Poe anthology. We did a Frankenstein anthology, Shakespeare anthology. And the idea was people would submit ideas for an 8-page story inspired by the source material. So you weren't doing an adaptation of a Poe story, but you were choosing your favorite character setting from that original source material, kind of twisting and do something new. And so we would accept pitches from independent writers, and then artists who were willing to come in on a team and be paired with someone. The benefit to them was at the end of it, they would own the story. It would be theirs, and we would just get, right of the first publication. But especially young writers coming up, or if you hadn't had any credits or anything like that, as long as the pitch was accepted, that's what we were looking for. And I don't know that I think now the way things are put together, much more for the Kickstarter model, because they know a lot of these smaller publishers know they're going to be going to crowdfunding. So they tie page rates into Kickstarters, or they tie page rates into like how much the campaign's going to pull together, that kind of stuff. Again, we were putting together all of our books way before a lot of that was going on. So things are probably a little bit different now. As far as creator-owned series, or for a while we were a packaging company. So if a team had put together a comic and wanted an imprint to be under the imprint Red Stylo, especially the packaging side, there's the comics, putting together a comic, and then there's packaging the book and making it look like a book from a traditional publisher. At that time was sort of paramount for a lot of people, and so it was better to kind of huddle under a publishing house, and so that's what the company did for a really long time.
Could you elaborate a little bit on what packaging is?
So this group is probably all understands, putting together a comic, finding, comic pages, that kind of stuff. But once you have your story, and once you have all your pages, then what's got to happen? Everybody knows you need a killer cover, and you might go find a hired gun, get a great artist for a cover, and that person might not even be part of your team, and you're bringing in a cover. But there's so much more that goes into this, and any letterer will tell you that when you're lettering a story, it's not just putting words in a bubble, like placement and font and all these things. The same thing is true with the packaging of a project. So all of the graphic design that goes into putting together the end pages, putting together that indicia, the logo, or header on a comic, those things really do sell a package. And so just like a novelist can put together a fantastic novel, if they don't have the book cover, if they don't have the set, they don't have the editor kind of putting this thing together, and a publisher who can package this thing in a professional way, even something as simple as a barcode can keep you out of a comic shop. So packaging, that's what all of that entails. And one of the things I do tell people if they are publishing on their own is make friends with a graphic designer, because your book will suffer if you don't have that sleek, great design. And we all know what it looks like, because when you go to a comic shop and you see, sometimes you don't even you don't know the company, you don't know the authors, you don't know even the artists that you're seeing, but something about the way that book is put together, you're drawing you in. Image did this so very well for decades, and has done this so very well for decades. And so that's why we had so many great independent teams explode. A lot of that had to do with packaging. It's this kind of, it's almost hard to describe, but it's really appealing. And so,
Did you now
sorry.
that you said this was beat the before times? Are you guys still doing anthologies and creator-owned projects and packaging?
Doing creator-owned projects and packaging.
Okay, got it.
But I think, especially with the pandemic, and I think just our personal situation family-wise, that was another reason why Peter and I were talking about, you're laboring over here, and I think Peter saw very early like how great it would be to maybe have a comic to accompany a smaller project that he was working on, because any bit of promotion that you can put together, even putting together a mock movie poster, something about that makes that pitch package kind of click for people and gets that interest. And especially everybody was looking for digital like content, really quick content, especially when the pandemic started. And so how to package those things, how to put together those kinds of projects, and like what could you send out or what could you show people, because production had ground to a halt. What could we be working on? So I think that this new idea was born out of those conversations during the pandemic.
Now, Peter, let me ask you, what's the process for a project to go from idea to an actual film that gets shot?
Well, there's a lot of different processes. The ones that I've done, I've self-funded my projects and put the teams together myself. Traditionally, what you would do is obviously you have your idea and then you write it down, or you can start pitching investors. Like some people do it as early as conception, like, just having the idea and then somebody will help them develop it, because it costs money at all these stages, right? So from the idea to writing it down, it takes a lot of time, and your time is money. So, and it's also time that you can't be spending on other things, especially as a early on filmmaker, it's going to cost you a lot of money actually, to do these things. And it's going to take away time that you can be spending trying to, if you are an actor, trying to get on other projects as an actor, a stunt person trying to get on projects as a stunt person, or training or going to school or different things. I mean, because if you have this idea, then really the key word for all of it is just collaboration. But you also need to find a team to collaborate with. And so you have to find people that believe in your idea enough to lend their talents to it beyond what you can do yourself. And then kind of do that cost benefit analysis along the way to see like if it's going to be worth it to move forward. Because if you can only get it to a certain point, but then you can't get a good camera person, then the project's not really going to be that great. Or sound, you need to, and really film encompasses all of these things, right? So you have to get the sound person, because you can have okay images, but if the sound's not good, then nobody's going to love your film. You need to get a good camera person. So because you want to get those nice dynamic shots that are going to be able to help you tell the story the way that you want to. And then you have to have your actors that are going to be able to convey the emotions that you want and get to those places. If you have stunts, finding people that are going to be safe and they're going to be able to, execute as you need it, without, killing anybody, killing themselves, destroying equipment, destroying a location. And depending on how much budget you have, you might have to ask for a lot of favors, and film equipment's not easy to come by, and it's not cheap. Lighting people, production design, makeup, and sometimes, especially early on, people can kind of be like, well, I can skirt around getting these people. But what ends up happening is that, if you don't say you just say like, oh, I don't need a makeup person, then a lot of things need makeup that you don't think would need makeup. Even, say somebody gets a big pimple on their forehead, that's like the best case scenario. But, or say somebody, accidentally cuts their face, and then you have to cover it up. Because if you have a cut in the frame, it might tell a different story than what you want. So, really the key word is always going to be collaboration and bringing a good team together. And from start, you're going to, have your idea, write your script, send the script around to people, get them excited about the project, really get them excited about their part of the project, allow those people to bring their own experience to it, and then you have to talk about the thing nobody likes to talk about is like how much money you're going to be paying them, and how much money you have. It might be free, but that's a conversation you're going to have. And then you have to find your locations, you have to find your equipment, camera equipment, sound equipment, or sometimes the people that you're bringing on will have their own equipment. You have to cast your actors, make sure that you're rehearsing with them so that they get the feel for it. So when you get onto set, you have a very good workflow of not having them trying to remember their lines or something like that. So everybody's prepared on the day. Get your lighting crew, get your sound. Like I think I said, sound already. And then after you get everything shot, then now you're going to have all these. You also need your DIT people, all the data, and because you're going to have a lot of footage, and it's going to be a lot of data on these cards, and then you have to have a computer that's strong enough to put them on to edit, or you have to find an editor, and then the post-production process starts up, and the post-production process can take even longer than the actual production. So you have from there you have to have the editor, and then once the edit's done, then you go back and forth between the producers, the director, and the writer, and like all whoever's involved in that, to make sure that the story is to a certain point that you want it. And then if you have special effects, you need to have a special effects person come on. Sometimes the editor does it, sometimes they don't, and sometimes you don't want them to do it too, because they're going to be good at it or not. Everybody has their specialties. And then once you have that, then you have to get a colorist to make sure that all the colors are going to line up, and make sure that, because maybe one day the sun was a little brighter and another day that it wasn't, but on camera, it's supposed to be all one day. So you have to make sure that those colors and lighting are matching. Or if you want to put different colors in there to convey different things in your story, then that's also something you need to, that would probably be something that came in the concept. And then once that's done, and then you have the artist, then you have the edit done, you have the coloring done. Now you have the sound designer that has to go in there and like make sure that the voices are heard, make sure that everything's even, and make sure that the Foley sounds like something gets hit or something like that, you have a different sound in there. So if there's a punch, you have that sound in there, or a chainsaw, something like that. Even if you have the sound on the day, it might not sound the same on, like, because you had something like it might not sound the same, so you might need to have a Foley artist come in there. So then you have a sound pass, and then after that you have there's a lot of steps, and then after that, then you finally get your full export of everything. And then you have, if you're going to be putting it out, if you're just putting it out on YouTube, you can kind of just put it out there. But if you're trying to, say, put it into film festivals, or you're trying to put it into theaters, or even on a TV show or something like that, you're starting to go a little further. Then you have, all your marketing people. Then you have all the business side of it, because now you have a product that you need to sell. And then hopefully you've been getting people excited about this project early on, so that by the time you get here, then you're kind of hitting the ground running with it. But that could be TV advertisements, it could be word of mouth, it could be social media, whatever campaigns that you need in order to do that. That's going to cost a lot of money. And then also, if you're putting it in film festivals, hopefully you have the money to do that. And then once you get accepted to something, then there's I can't remember the name of it right now, but you have to have a certain kind of package. DP.
Press kit?
No, well, yes, you need to have a press kit. That's part of the marketing, and just to make sure that they know about the film. But then also, you have to deliver the actual file to them that is going to be a certain kind of format where they can put it onto a theater screen, right? And that's going to be different than, say, you're just uploading it to YouTube, or if you're putting it on a streaming service or whatnot. So, they kind of say, it's like making a film is a miracle, and it really is, just because there's so many moving parts and so many steps to it. But once you get it done, and once you make it, then you have that piece of art that's forever, and it's beautiful.
So it sounds like you guys are planning on working on some joint projects, right, between Simplicity and Red Stylo. What's the reasoning what's the reasoning for working on the joint project? And I had another question. And is there a plan? Is there a plan on how this is going to work and what's going to happen afterwards? So you talked a little bit about marketing and stuff like that. So what is the reasoning behind our joint project and what's the plan? I mean, not, you
Um,
don't have to give me everything, but just, a general
well,
idea.
I can take this one. For at least for film, I know there's going to be different maybe some different reasons for Enrica too, but as far as film goes, one of the reasons why it's so important for films to have some kind of source material that they like, that makes it different is if we were to have, if you have a comic, then it's an IP that's going off of. So if I have a screenplay, I can sell that screenplay, and then it's off of my hands. I don't own it anymore. But if we have IP that is a comic, and then we license that out, then all of a sudden we still retain ownership of it. So that's one business aspect of it. But then also something I didn't mention when I was kind of going on my diatribe about how to make a film, in the very beginning sections of it, you're going to want to storyboard your story, right? Because you have the screenplay, but then you need to translate that screenplay to some kind of visual medium beforehand, right? So you have your shot list, and then from that shot list, you can create storyboards that kind of show what the camera move is going to do. Is it going to tilt? Is it going to pan? Is it going to dolly, or what it's going to do? And what's nice about comics is that when you have that comic that you're starting from, they can kind of serve as storyboards on their own. So you kind of skip that step a little bit. That big step of planning of pre-visualization is kind of done already when you have a comic. Now, obviously, going from a comic to a film isn't going to be a one-to-one thing, so there's going to be some changes to it as far as how you translate it. But that's why a lot of comic fans are really mad when a movie comes out and it's like it's not the same as the comic. Well, some things don't translate exactly, and it's just kind of how it works. So as far as like the films aspect of it goes, going into comics with it is just such a great way to kind of merge the literary to the visual before the actual movie is actually made. And not to mention on the business side of it, you own an IP, and that's nice.
Do you guys already have the project in mind? You already have, how far along are you guys?
In this case, we were looking for a point of entry. I think it's funny because like when you've got family and you do something different than one another, but it's close enough, like the ideas start to gel. That was kind of the case for us. Comics is not like film, and film is obviously this very huge kind of undertaking and not like comics, but that collaborative nature is there. But I don't know if you've ever heard that story of everybody thinks they've got problems, and then you could actually sit in a circle and put everybody's problem in the middle and see what everybody else's problems were. You might take yours back. There was, there was a little bit of that when Peter and I are talking about like the different frustrations of um, um, trying to break in or trying to get an idea to kind of like go. So my series, Crossing, Paranormal Mystery Series, has really been it's the most recent project that I kind of wrapped up the first arc for, and it was one of the first projects that I really felt I wanted to translate, and um, I had a 6-issue miniseries that I felt okay, I feel like I want to make this something. And so I talked to my brother. All right, so like how do we do this? But in putting that together, I realized he had this really great project. He had just put his short film Pawns together. And you can see it on YouTube, and it's really wonderful film. I put the trailer in the chat here, but you can also find the film on YouTube. But what was really great about that short film that he put together is it hinted at a larger story, and it hinted at more, which is what a really great comic issue will do. Your comic issue has the story, it's contained, and even though you want to go to the next one, like each comic, if you've done your job, is satisfying and it's great. And so Peter's film Pawns was really satisfying, really great on its own, but it also hinted at this bigger world. It also hinted at something that a 6-issue miniseries, because you have pawns, rooks, knights, bishops, queens and then the king. And so like it was something that just looked like a project that you could see it, you could finish it, and we could visualize it. And when you can visualize it, you can make it happen. So we both realized that, hey, you've got something, I'm going to take this. Let's move it over here. I'm going to needle on this for a little bit. And then you take my series and you go over here and like help me with this. And that's kind of what we're doing. So I'm really excited. And that's my long-winded way of saying that we've got a project coming up, Pawns, and our hope is to have the Kickstarter up and going for Comic-Con in July.
I'm going to ask you one more question, and I'm going to open it up to the audience if anybody has any questions. But I will tell you this though, that I launched a Kickstarter the same time as New York Comic Con, and nothing. It was only Kickstarter I had that failed because everybody was too busy with New York Comic Con. So I would wait until after.
One thing, we did a campaign during Kickstarter. I got a really good suggestion. I think it was from Comics Launch about
Tyler.
kind of timing it so that your campaign, the Dead Zone, coincided with the show.
Oh.
Because you had to promote anyway, and you're putting it out there and you had to promote anyway. So we had our QR code at the table, and we offered a prize for anybody who pledged at the table. So anybody who would pledge, we had a small thing to give, and it was, something we could talk about, interact about. And a lot of people, sometimes they're really engaged, they want to know about it, and sometimes they're like looking for a nice way to walk past your table. So I'll take a picture. And they took a picture, and so we got more signups during that time, and it was the dead zone anyway, so everything was a win. So timing it around that really helped. One of the things that Kickstarter is really, it's kind of new for me, but not new to a lot of people who do campaigns all the time. But that run up to the campaign where you can have, you go to a link and it takes you to where the campaign's going to be, and you click it to be notified when the campaign's going to launch. That is a fantastic tool to get those conversions. And the more people who actually sign up for that, even if they don't ultimately pledge, they're aware of your project. And Kickstarter has been really, really great about providing that tool in the run up to a project to get people to that page, rather than, a card that somebody has to take away and then they go to the website, but it hasn't launched yet or anything like that. It's like gearing up and charging up all those people, getting them excited. And then when the campaign launches, it goes. So that's another thing that a show can be really good for, because you're talking about your campaign and people are like, oh, okay, I'd love to hear about it. And then take that QR code and they're going to be notified when the thing actually launches, or if it's in the dead zone, it's just a win because it's another way to promote the project that you're doing anyway. So we had a lot of success with that.
That's a great idea. I have
Thanks,
to try
Tyler.
Yeah, Tyler is great. Yeah, he's been on the show too before. Okay, let me ask this last question. Oh, did I already ask my question? No, let me ask this question and I'll open up to the audience. So you've been doing this since 2008. I don't remember how long Peter's been doing film, but how has both industries changed since you guys started?
Peter, I'll let you go.
Okay. Well, I started in 2011. Like I said, I was started with as an actor, and then I turned into a stuntman, and I've been doing that for the last 13 years. It was very when I first started. I feel like since we started, diversity has been a bit bigger push now. Obviously, it started before that, but I think that lately, especially for Asian people, it's gotten a lot more accepting and coming out of there. I think that there's been a lot better opportunities for people of color inside of the industry since I started, which is actually very encouraging. It can be a little frustrating for me personally, just because since I'm a mixed race person, it can be difficult for me to get cast sometimes, just because they're like, no, we want a fully Japanese person, we want a fully this, which is great. I think that's a lovely thing. But for me personally, I'm like, I'm not any of these things. Like you say it's a Chinese role, like I can't play a full Chinese person. Well, versus like back in the 90s, diversity was horrible, but then they're like, we need a Chinese person. Ah, he'll do. So like I wouldn't have had a chance. But I think that I've been very fortunate in my career. I've really loved all the things I've been able to do. But and then looking at things, obviously things went a lot more digital, a lot more CGI, a lot more superheroes. And I think that even since I started, it started a little bit before that, but definitely I think, comic book movies really took over the entire industry and made Comic-Con a huge thing. I remember going to Comic-Con when I was in college when my sister was, would help out with her table. And, like Hollywood was there, but then now Hollywood is everywhere in there. And every comic person is now trying to make a movie, and every movie is trying to have a comic, like my sister said. So that's definitely been a big change too. Just how much the world in general has embraced comics and just that medium of storytelling, and really made it a legitimate way of storytelling. Before it was just, oh, that's kid stuff, and then there were serious comics, but like, it was more of a fringe kind of belief, and then like the people were kind of like, you're kind of weird, you like comics. But now it's just like everybody likes comics, everybody likes superheroes, everybody's okay and open about talking about it. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Yeah, and it really has been cool seeing that change, just because there are so many great stories within comics, not just superhero stuff, but just in comics in general, that are beyond, the regular stereotypical things that people think about with comics too. And like some movies were from comics that people don't even know were from comics. I think, what was it? I think probably one of the first major ones was like Blade, really back in the day, that like, really kickstarted, going into like superheroes and stuff. It saved Marvel. I mean, Marvel's about to go out of business, and then that movie, it was just a huge part of my life, but then I didn't even know it was a comic. I just thought it was a really cool movie, and then I find out later, yeah, it was a comic, and it really saved Marvel, and that really revolutionized the way that the film industry finds its source material, and I think that's cool.
Enrica?
Um, uh, Ramon, I just think it's rude to ask people how old they are. I feel like
I didn't ask you. You said that you've been doing it since 2008.
so many things have changed. I think that what remains true is that what I was told, I was very, very fortunate to do an internship at Marvel and get to see how the comics were made at the biggest and one of the best companies out there very, very early. And so that shaped how I thought things were supposed to go. So there was a little bit of that going into my career. I kind of have an accidental company. I was told, hey, if you want to get into comics, you got to make comics. I think that's still true today. If you want to get into comics, you need to just make them. And everybody tells you that and everybody says it. So that's what I was doing. And then I also wanted to be an editor, and nobody was going to take me seriously if I was only editing my own stuff. So started to edit other people's work, and that's where the anthologies came from. And they were a success and popular and kept going. So I have this accidental publishing company that I'm very, very proud of all these years later. But when I first started, though, this is pre-social media. Like Twitter hadn't even come out yet. And I did my first campaign on Kickstarter the second year Kickstarter existed. So things have really changed in the time that I've been in the industry. And now I think I could tell you all the way things are different, but I could tell you kind of some of the ways that I still struggle. Unless you understand social media marketing, unless you understand algorithms and posting, you will fall behind. So I don't know. I that certainly was not the way it was coming in. And now I've talked to so many creators that don't do shows anymore at all because they find them to be a losing proposition, because they're finding so much success, even just being there I call them their personas in social media, but just being their snarky selves on the socials, and they're making, you know, they're keeping their audiences that way. And that's just how they continue to do business. They don't even have to leave their houses anymore. And I find that to be a little hard to take sometimes, because I still like the old school way of doing business, but that is the way the world has changed since I came up. Yes, I'm old. So.
Not that old. I just want to say that I forgot to mention earlier that I met Enrico was one of the very, very first professional creators that I met when I started. And she was very encouraging. This just the sweetest words of encouragement I got from Enrico when I first started off. She looked at my work and she told me that, you know, I'm doing the right thing, blah, blah, blah. And she's always been very supportive and always great to hang out with and to talk to.
Well, it helps that you do cool stuff. So, you know.
Thank you very much. So let me open up to the audience now. I know we have a couple of people here who probably hopefully have questions. Anybody, guys? Yes, Jay.
So, Peter, you kind of talked about this a little bit. How do you feel that the comics industry or community has responded to calls of the equality and equity? And then what changes do you two feel like it still need to be made? And I know I said comics, it could be entertainment, film, video games, you know, but like how are we approaching and how have we responded and what changes still need to be made?
You know, I feel like for the most part, film really is a reflection of just society in general. You know, whatever it's sometimes lags, but for the most part, they are just responding to what the audience wants, because those are the customers, right? And the customer is always right, quote unquote. I know that there has been some, you know, pushback on like some of the equality things, and there's also been a lot of like pushing of it too. And I think that, you know, the pendulum was so far up for so long that now it's kind of swinging back the other way. And whenever that scenario happens with anything in society, there's always going to be this kind of like strange, what do we do? How is this, you know, I don't like how it's being done. I do like how it's being done, and kind of that friction that society has. But, you know, I think that with all that friction and with all the uncertainty around, you know, these kind of topics, I do think that it's net positive. And yes, there are definitely a lot of things that could be, you know, done. But as we become more of a global, I mean, we become more of a global society over the last couple of decades, you know, it kind of, I mean, money talks, and it's opened up the markets to a lot of different places, like in Asia and like, you know, Africa, Middle East, and Australia and Europe, and, you know, different places. And so media isn't so centered on the West anymore. So now you're going to have more interest in stories that are from other places or from other perspectives than they were in the past. And I think that's going to keep going. And I think that's a good change that's going to be happening. I hope that answered your question. Enrica?
Okay. I thought that question was for you.
Oh, I think you said both of it, but okay.
Jay, did you have a question for me?
It was the both of you. It was both of you.
It's a question.
Equity in comics, I think.
Equity.
And what changes still need to be made?
I think that around 2014, 2015, 2016, there was a lot of discussion about trigger warnings and lots of discussion about you saw this big rise in issue-driven themes in comics. And it's interesting because a lot of people point out it was always there. You always had political commentary in comics. You always had themes, especially in tumultuous times in the country. So it's actually not new. It feels sort of jarring to certain demographics of people, but it was always there. There was always this sort of political bend. I think in the time that I've been in comics, it's much more overt and people are much more comfortable in it because getting published is much more democratic now. And what I mean by democratic is that it's easier to do. There's so many different ways to be published now. It's cheaper to publish your own work now than it has ever been before. And when everything is getting more expensive, it's actually easier to get your work out there now than it has ever been before, if you can find the means to produce it. So it's getting those clicks and getting the eyes on it. That's the thing to figure out. But actually producing the work, getting yourself published, getting yourself noticed was kind of the hardest thing when I was coming up. And now that's not the hard part. Getting it out there is not the hard part at all. Getting people to care is the thing that there's so many things competing for your eyes now that you could work an entire year on a project and it feels like you get it out there, and unless you've got some traction, bye, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. And so I think that for a creator, like I could give you my commentary on the way I think people should pay attention more, but actually I think it's more interesting to sort of talk from a creator's side, especially for indies. Never discount how many people still haven't seen your work. So don't get tired of promoting it, because there are a whole bunch of people out there who've never heard of you. And so and all of these things are going to still be new to them. So even though you've brought the same book to the same to shows for years, you're still going to meet people you've never met before. You're still going to bring something to them that they haven't seen before. So from the creator side, everything that you've done is still brand new. It's just not new to you. And you need to get that out there, and you need to be consistent in getting your message out there. And that's a lesson that I still am learning myself and trying to get things going. But I think that's the biggest thing. Politics are pretty overt. The things that we're all wrestling with and dealing with are pretty overt, but there's now everything can be niche. Everything you can, there's an audience for, there's a place to go for everything, and it's easier to get your work out there than it ever has been, for good or for ill. And but use it for good. Do it. Use that opportunity for the good is the only advice I can give. I think that part's great. So.
Anybody have another question? Robert.
I may ask.
Oh, go ahead.
Hey. Okay, well, this is more about the actual creation of the comics, I would say, but there are some things that you can only do in comics that you can't do in, like, say, like prose novels or film. So could you either of you give any of an example of you think is a strong storytelling in horror comics? Because personally, I'm not a horror comics person, but I would like to know how, what makes a really good reveal, like a monster reveal or something like that.
Well, I think that's a preference thing. I'll start. I think that's a preference thing. Obviously, every audience member is different. Everybody's going to think differently about this thing. Some people are going to love the Freddy Kruegers, and other people are going to like the vampires, and other people are going to like, the Jasons. So you don't really know what it is until you talk to individuals. But I mean, for me personally, I'm a very big proponent of I think that it doesn't matter if it's horror or sci-fi or drama or comedy. It's really just building it up properly and having the payoff be different than what you expected, and and hopefully in a good way, right? So it needs to be surprising, and I don't think that that's genre specific. I think that for me personally, the things that I like in horror versus not is just going to be, how do they build up this thing? How do they set it up? And then how's the payoff given? And if it's satisfying to me personally, I mean, obviously my personal things, I like it when there's a certain amount of mystery behind it. And then I do like that Sam Raimi kind of idea in Evil Dead where you don't even see the monster. You just see the camera following the guy, and his reaction to it is freaking out. And I mean, that's genius. It's like then you allow the audience to use their imagination to fill in the blanks. I don't know if you can do that in comics, but in film you can do that. And I think that's really cool. But you can't do it in every aspect either. I mean, when the movie Signs came out, and you know, you're watching this, like what's it called, like the children's birthday party, and then the alien walks across, and then oh my god, it freaks out. And like even to this day, it's like it can still send shivers down your spine. So it's like it's really hard to say. Obviously it's different for everybody, but I think that for me it's just how does it built up, and how is the payoff different than what I expected. And if that differential is wide enough, then I love it. Enrica?
Some of the best horror that I've seen comics wise, like I think like you noted, it's hard to do a jump scare unless the person who's putting together the book like really understands the page turn. And that's another thing about laying out your book and using that page turn and making sure when your book's put together, that's one of those things you have to think about. And it was really funny. I do remember during my internship, it wasn't just putting these books together, but actually figuring out where the ads were supposed to go in the middle of the story. And that's certainly not something that I think that the writer was instructed to think about, and like how to split up a book. But as the intern, I'm sitting there like reading these really great comics, completely engrossed, and realizing I've got to put this stupid Cheetos ad in the middle of this really great book and not screw up this great like run of scenes, but it's got to go in there somewhere. And you're making this commercial decision in this completely heartless way for a book. And with indie, you don't have to do that. But I think horror, when you've got these really great characters that are charismatic, and some people have found it problematic when your bad guy is more charismatic than the good guy, when the villain is more compelling and interesting than anybody who's fighting him, to the point where, that old story, I don't know if it's even true, that Anthony Hopkins was like completely horrified that people loved Hannibal Lecter so much. And he was just horrified that he had done that. I hope that story is true, but in comics, like anything that, especially for a creator, anything that's going to slow your reader down so that they have to take the full weight of what's just happened. That moment, that stomach drop, that horrific realization. It's hard. You can't force it when you're writing it. You want it to happen. You're telling your artist in your script, this is what I want you to feel when people are going to see this image. Anything that slows you down so people aren't skimming through the floppy or skimming through the page, because you can turn a page physically, but it's something that's going to make you stop and think. And then the horror sinks in and stays with you. I think that is some of the most successful writing. So thinking about those beats, those story beats, thinking about, Peter was talking about the payoff and something that's kind of unexpected, or even if that's where dread comes in, right? Like even if the thing is eventually happening and you're building up to it, and then it really does happen, that inexorable march to the end, that can stay with you as a reader. And so for a writer, creator to think about what's going to draw out that moment psychologically, I think that's going to inform, it informs a story. It's part of a story beat, but horror, to me, again, is about that cathartic kind of, I've been taken out of myself for a minute and almost relieved to be back here instead of where I just was. That's the success of a story. And it's so hard to sort of will it to happen, but know it when it does. And I'm trying to think of some like examples of comics that I've seen. A comic that really hurt my feelings. And he wanted to hurt my feelings, and he wanted to hurt everybody's feelings. But I did read the first Crossed trade from oh gosh, my fever-addled brain is forgetting the writer, but it's this horrible series where the cross is on the face, and humanity descends into any awful, terrible thing you could possibly think of, and like that's the apocalypse. Garth Ennis, the Cross series. The horror in that book is scarring, but the devastation at the end of that book is just to this day. And not that you want to do that to anybody, but if you want to do that to people as a horror writer, that's another kind of way to go. But the twists and turns in that, that's one example.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question before we wrap things up. Any-
Hello, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
I got a question. How can you show the dread? Hey, excuse me. Hello, I'm talking to someone here. Please. Okay. How can you show the emotion? Like, how can you first show the idea, then the emotion of it? Like, how can you keep the character's interest?
I don't know what's up.
Hello?
Like in general, like, you know, just how do you make the audience care for the character?
Yeah, how can you make the characters care for the characters?
Well, I mean, it's different for everything. I mean, you know, I think that I'll talk for film, you know, the main thing that I've seen is really just being able to allow the audience to see themselves in the character in some way. They have to, you know, empathize in some way, sympathize in some way, or also maybe even pity or feel sorry for that character, and then that will endear the audience to them in some way. So it can be a lot of different ways. You know, there's no one way to do it.
Excuse me. My way is like you need to invest with the character. If you be in love with the character so many times, you start to invest with the character.
Sure, but that's what I mean is finding that investment, making kind of like getting the audience to make that investment. I think a lot of times comes from figuring out a way to have that that character have some kind of trait or experience some kind of thing that either makes the person feel sorry for them or empathize with them or sympathize with them. And then in that way, then the audience will make that investment into them. I hope that answers the question.
Enrica, what about you?
I'm going to steal some really great advice that I heard or read. Stephen King talks about that when he talks about writing about horror. He said that think about your characters and how don't try to think about putting an extraordinary character in a normal situation. Put normal people in extraordinary situations. And if they're real, and if they are good or bad, how they respond, how they react to extraordinary circumstances, that gets you that investment. Because everybody can identify with that. They're a person that you recognize. I see you, I know you, I at least know you. I know what you are, where you're coming from. And then confronted with an extraordinary situation. There was a joke online years ago about how long would you survive handcuffed to a bunk bed with a raptor, and like the decisions that you would make if you were handcuffed to a bunk bed with a velociraptor, and like the things that you would do to try to survive when you can't move around. But that's just a person with a monster in this extraordinary, crazy situation. And if you can recognize something in them and see them, I think that gets you that investment. Even if the investment is, I hope you die. I want to see you die. I hate you. I can't wait for the monster to shred you. That's the investment. And the pay is, did the monster win? Did he get you? Did you get free? What? And you're invested. That can be it can be compassionate or it can be antagonistic. But if you see them and you know them, I know you, I recognize you. I think that's what gets you that in this.
Okay, let's do one more question from Robert. Robert has a question he really wants to ask, and I think it's a good question. So go ahead, Robert.
So I'm a few pages away from finishing my own comic book. And I just like to, if there's any advice you can give me other than Ramon saying to not do it during Comic-Con conventions and the barcode thing you suggested. So is there any other advice you can give me? Because personally, my biggest fear is that people are going to find out about the Kickstarter by the end of the week. So
Well, we were just talking about the dead zone, so be ready for it. That is going to happen. And if I tell you your worst fear is going to happen, then it's okay. Get it out of the way. Your worst fear is going to happen, but you get your most engagement the first couple days, and you get your most engagement at the end. And at the end, in the end, it's just engagement. And you're going to suffer through the dead zone, but you're going to get through the dead zone, and it's okay. So what you're afraid of is going to happen. It's still okay, and you need to expect it and embrace it, even, because part of what's great about crowdfunding is that short amount of time. We're running out of time, guys, and it becomes more valuable as, like, that's the law of scarcity, right? Like, it becomes more valuable as there's less time, and you got to get in there. So look for it and embrace that part. What I have found and what I suggest to everybody is really get familiar with the tools that these crowdfunding campaigns are now giving you to get your project out there. And when they say use this link to get people signed up, get them interested in this, get a link in front of them so that they can sign up and be ready to get that conversion when it's time. Use those tools, because it's not just, Ramon will tell you, and I can tell you, it's not just launching it. It's not just telling everybody about it. It's not just, shouting about it on social media. All the preparation that goes into it, at least a platform like Kickstarter, I don't know as much about Indiegogo, but a platform like Kickstarter is anticipating that and is actually helping you, and is even encouraging you to write into them and ask them questions and get to know the staff over there. Those are actually real people. There's real humans over there. It's not just this big system. And you can take advantage of that and ask them questions. And hey, can I get some feedback? Is there anything that I can see? Is there anybody I can talk to? And you're going to find some willingness there. Podcasts like this one, podcasts like Comics Lunch have some really, really great tools as well. So kind of take a look at those, check some boxes. You're not going to be able to do everything, but you might get some really, really great ideas. Finally, I think that once your campaign is done, what I do know about Indiegogo is you can continue to raise money even after a Kickstarter. So one thing I am seeing, and I did this for one of my campaigns, once you've raised your money on one, you still have a project and you can go to another one. And they want you to do that now. And you're not confined to just one anymore. So Indiegogo especially has said, continue to raise money. Tell people where you may raise money one place, tap into our audience over here. And it is another way to keep going. And again, there are no old projects when you're indie. Everything you're doing is always new because not everybody has seen you. I guarantee it. I hope that's helpful.
So let me paraphrase. Yeah, it's very helpful. The last thing you suggested, I didn't really think about that. Was I'm just paraphrasing what you're saying to me. It helps me to process things. You're saying that I could use Indiegogo and Kickstarter and like have them work together or something to that effect.
For Indiegogo, I don't think it's at the same time. But let's say you did your Kickstarter campaign, and then you did I think it's called Indiegogo in Demand or something like that. But look on the site, and you're seeing, and you're upfront with people. I just raised this much money over here. Check out this new thing over here. And you're tapping into some people shop on Kickstarter, some people are shopping on Indiegogo, and these sites want you to cross-pollinate because they're making money on you. And so they're not going to be like, don't come here and don't make money over here. They want to make money on you too. So that's a way. It's a way. I'm not saying it depends on your campaign, and it depends on your audience and how well you do and getting it out in front of people. But it's kind of cool to know that.
Or maybe not at the same time, Robert.
And not at the same
Yeah,
time.
I'll research it. But But it is something to think about. So
Yeah. Stuff like backer kit too. I'm thinking that I have found that Kickstarter backers, especially super backers, they've backed a lot of campaigns, and fulfillment is a pain for a lot of them. For a really long time, I resisted using like a third party fulfillment because my campaigns weren't big enough, really, I thought, to justify it. But now, because fulfillment is kind of expected in a certain way by so many people, something like backer kit, there's a front end cost, but ultimately you have a way to continue to make money on that platform too, because once your backers are going there for fulfillment, they might spring for something else they didn't happen to buy during the campaign. So there's ways to make money there too.
Okay,
when
well,
you
we're
say
gonna go ahead and
fulfillment
wrap it up.
service, I think
I'm sorry, Robert.
I just want to double check. When you mean fulfillment service, that's the thing where they help you out after you get the money or something like that. Like they're the ones who help you distribute the bulk.
They do the mailings.
stuff.
Sometimes they do mailings, but sometimes it's just delivery for your digital delivery. So I use drive-through comics for my the digital delivery, so I'm not sending him his majillion emails, but it's a mixed effect. Something like Backer Kit will deliver your digital files, but there is a front end cost to it, and you have to kind of invest in it on faith. So if you've never done one before, maybe do your first campaign, kind of see how it goes and see what's going on, because I lost money the first time I used Backer Kit, but I made money the next time I used it. So that stuff's a little bit more, and it's changing all the time. There are other companies that you can go to that might not be as expensive, but backers on Kickstarter are much more sophisticated in what they expect for fulfillment, how they want to get those digital files. And if you're like me, there's still a week you're stuffing envelopes and putting on labels and bringing your truck to the post office and backing up and dumping this on this poor postal worker who doesn't know just what just happened. So that still happens to me. So
Okay, let's wrap it up. Let's give a nice round of applause to Peter and Enrica for coming out to play with us. And then most of you guys are muted, but that's okay. Enrica, Peter, thank you so much. One last thing, if you could let everybody know where they can find you online.
find me at redstylomedia.com. I'm going to be at Comic-Con this year with Peter in San Diego. And please find Pawns on YouTube and look for the Comic-Con Kickstarter coming up really soon.
Peter, what about you?
You can find me on Instagram, Peter Jang Official, at Peter Jang Official. It's PeterJang Official. And then also my website is www.simplicity.pictures. There's no .com, it's just simplicity.pictures. And when you go there, I have links to my different films that I've made so far. There is my personal page as well, as an actor, as a stuntman, as a director, and as a writer. And they'll have links to my International Screenwriters Association profile and also my Coverfly profile. And like I said, you'll see us at Comic-Con and Kickstarter pretty soon. And looking forward to seeing you guys there. And you can also look me up on YouTube. I'm all over that place. The videos and I've been a part of have amassed over 87 million views on YouTube. So I've been on a lot of stuff. Yeah, Superpower Beatdown. If any of you guys are fans of that series from Bat in the Sun, I was both Scorpion and Ryu from Street Fighter against the White Ranger and Green Ranger from Power Rangers. And there is a short film about that where they turn Ryu into a Power Ranger. And I am now officially a Power Ranger. And there's an action figure of me. Yeah, you can find the Ryu Ranger action figure and Hasbro if you want to look at that too. So.
Okay, before you all go, let me just make a few quick announcements. We have Paul Kupperberg on May 2nd, and we'll talk about, he's one of the old timers, writers from the 70s and 80s. And he's going to talk about going from fan to pro. And then we have on May 16th, we have Hunter Goranson, who is the president of Oni Press. And then we have Joan Hilty, who works for Avatar Studios, animation studio. And then on May 20th, we have Barbara Dillon, who is the editor-in-chief of Fan Base Press. So hope you guys can join us for those. And again, thank you everyone for coming out. And again, thank you to Peter and Enrica. Okay.
Thank
So you guys
you.
have a nice evening. Enrica, I hope you feel better. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much for doing this despite your cold.
Thank you guys. Hope to see
And
you
hope
at the
to
show.
see you guys soon. See you soon one of these days.
Thank you, Ramon. Have a good day.
Take care. Bye-bye.